Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Nicholas Guillermo, founder of Activism Truth and RIPAC, the Political Action Committee for the People. And this is a special video about the libertarian philosophy, the anarchist philosophy, the philosophy of the natural law known as the non-aggression principle, and how that applies to diet, and how a authentic libertarian or a true anarchist, someone who's willing to change their life to live up to the highest standard of non-aggression possible, will ultimately change their diet to go from where they are now, which is likely a carnism-based diet and predicated on meat, to a more plant-based diet with vegetarian leaning, to pure vegetarianism, to vegetarian vegan hybrid, to pure vegan. Ultimately, the rationale is multifold. There are economic principles, and I'm going to go into depth on this. According to the non-aggression principle, why we would not want to purchase meat from any supermarket, for example, that is producing that on factory farms. The aspect of hunting and whatnot I will go into later that has to do with the spiritual side. But there's economic issues, there's ecological issues that cannot be denied. There are poison issues of how it affects the body. There are physiological issues associated with eating meat that cannot be denied. There are too many peer-reviewed studies to ignore. Double-blind peer-reviewed studies, and there's science of the body. There are myths and mistruths that must be acknowledged, that I implore you to do your own research and don't just try to take my word for it. But there are absolute contradictory evidences out there that will sway you to learn the truth about how the vegan diet is ultimately so healthy for you and how our bodies were naturally intended to be vegetarian or vegan. And I'll go into that. There's a spiritual aspect I'll go into. And I will talk about the differences between vegetarianism and veganism and why it is a proper path for people to transition to vegetarian to vegan or go straight to vegan right away. With an open mind, and I am I'm objectively a vegan, but open-minded to understanding that there is a place for vegetarianism in culture. I'll go into detail on that as well. First of all, let's start with the economic aspects of dealing with factory farms, with subsidies, with big agriculture, with GMOs. Let's just go into this because this is a major aspect of why purchasing meat in general, unless it's from a local farm where it's from a local butcher that you can verify, and is of itself feeding the beast system. Okay, it's subsidized agriculture that is the problem, and big agro, and it's the factory farms and the slaughterhouses that really they sustain a carnist culture, which is spiritually against our own instincts. And anyone who's in favor of the non-aggression principle, who wants to, which should be all people who want to ultimately live up to a life of the highest moral standard, you must understand that there is an agenda by the elite who have occulted information, who have hidden knowledge from people, who seek to use the culture of brutality and carnism as a way to degrade the moral basis for humanity, because there are directly proportional links to immorality and degradation of society and tyranny in government. So the more tyranny and immorality that the elite can persuade the people to pursue, the more tyranny that they will hold for themselves. It is the fact that the New York Stock Exchange, for example, was built on the grounds of a massive slaughterhouse, and that the current UN building in Europe was also built on top of a great slaughterhouse, and it is part of the blood sacrifice rituals of these demoniac rulers who they seek to push a dark, sinister force upon society with their debt-based monetary systems, with their media and propaganda systems and mind control processes, that they use meat and they use these dark energies of death and destruction from the slaughterhouses to ultimately control the people. There's tremendous evidence of this as well. And I'm just beginning to get into creating YouTube videos. It takes a whole lot of energy to go into detail and really pull out all the sources for this information. But making this video encourages me absolutely to write a blog on it later, and I'll put the link in the bottom of the video when that time comes. I'll update you with a new video, which is why you should subscribe. And then you can see the proof right there if you don't want to go and do your research for yourself. But it's important to know that the power elite have used the sinister dark forces of slaughterhouses to condition society. And it was the concentration camps in Nazi Germany that were actually modeled after the factory farming models for controlling livestock of animals, okay? Tyranny is proportional to immorality, and for the populations to continue to pursue a carnist-based diet predicated on meat, which is, in many people's views, a valuation of stature and financial levels, because the elite like to eat big steaks and whatnot and very expensive meats. Well, the poor people want to emulate that, and they get into it as well. It's an endless cycle. They keep people dependent on foods that ultimately make them sick, so that the elite can then profit off of the healthcare systems that they've installed with Obamacare. We'll see if Trump eliminates that, and other systems. Big pharma is intimately related with big agriculture. The sicker we are, the more profits they make, and that's a fact. Okay, so going into the economics, we have subsidies funding factory farms, funding the brutal slaughter of sentient beings. A hamburger would cost approximately $50 a burger if they were not subsidized. So be mindful of this. If you go out to eat, if you're interested in getting burgers, hot dogs, any kind of meats, which is very cheap today, you have to understand it's because it has been subsidized to bring you that cheap meat. In fact, is more expensive in the long term economically than it is to eat a plant-based lifestyle. And if we were to end all subsidies on meat, you'd see so many people switching over to plant-based foods because it's what's affordable. And it's honestly what's healthier for the body. You don't get as sick on plant-based lifestyles. And the whole B12 myth, I'll go into that too in this discussion. Okay, so economics. All right, so subsidies. We want to not participate in a system that is taking taxes forcefully from people and then using those taxes for the benefit of the few, or and using those taxes to benefit anyone against our interest. And benefiting those meat producers is not of our interest. They should sell meat if they, for that to happen on a free market without subsidies, and burgers would cost about $50 a piece because it takes an incredible amount of resources to create a adult cow. And, there is a crushing of the local agriculture markets by big agriculture and these factory farms. You have to keep that into account. This is totally anti-free market whenever you're purchasing meat. If you go to any restaurants, unless they locally source it from a local butcher, you are aggressively attacking the free market for local sustainable agriculture, which is ultimately what you would survive on and thrive on in the real world without government intervention. You need locally produced food either to be participating in that process or to source it locally. And when you subsidize money, you're giving money to companies that are consolidating power for their own profits to have big agriculture plots. You are outsourcing your own ability for food sustainability, making you dependent on the system, making you dependent on the government, dependent on their use of force and taxation, making you a slave to their system. You see a rising cost in grains and staples essential for life, for human consumption, because it takes so much land to produce agriculture and so much grains and staples to feed the livestock, that you see an absolute effect on the costs of these staples. They go up because they're being used. It's supply and demand principles. So there's more demand, so the cost is going up. And ultimately, we see, as a result of that, people in third world countries, because it is intimately related in global economics, literally starving because of the meat that people are putting on their plate in the richer countries. Okay, and right in our own country, I mean, it's harder for the poor to buy the vegetables they need, to buy the staple grains that they can survive on, because the cost has gone up so much due to the overproduction for the meat industry. There is a lack of resources. It takes an incredible amount of fresh water. We only have a limited amount of water on the planet. Water is essential for life. Water is life. And I know Native Americans lived on the grazing of the buffalo. They used that. They were very much into foraging as well, and had very much more plant-based lifestyle naturally. And you know, so many cultures have had meat, almost all world cultures, except for a few foundational cultures like the Vedic culture, which I'll express some more opinions on later. But they essentially use up so much water, it's going to impact the cost of waters in the future, prevents clean water from being accessible at a lower cost and available for the people. That is another major issue. There's, again, the lack of independence for local agriculture that cannot compete with big agro. So I must reiterate that point. It's very important. It's against free market economics to purchase meat. And I know a lot of people are thinking, unless it's from a local butcher, which I'll get into, there's reasons why you still don't want to purchase meat from them. You know, you need local food supplies. And we need to be sustainable in our future, and a world going towards veganism and vegetarianism will help us get there. Veganism ultimately is the model ideal, because vegetarianism still predicates itself off of cheeses and butters, and for that matter, the dairy products, the eggs, in many cases. And that is something that is financing the big agriculture, big factory farming of the animals in the first place as well. So it ultimately is the best choice to just not buy cheese and meats or eggs from, and you know, don't buy it if it's coming from a source that is killing the animals, especially if it's from a factory farm. You know, locally produced eggs, if you have your own chicken coop and you're using the eggs, no harm, no foul. Chickens aren't being eaten, but there are health consequences from the cholesterols that I'll get into later that affect you later on down in your life. There are peer-reviewed studies on this. These are not my opinions. These are facts. And I implore you, I'll put some links in the bottom of this YouTube video to research some of these things and see for yourself. Ultimately, I'm going to direct you to a Facebook group that I've created that has an archive of a lot of awesome information. All right, so ecologically, there is the global warming issue, although I talk more in my ecological concerns with global toxicity, because I understand there's a debate about warming and cooling. I believe man does have an impact on the atmosphere. I feel it has a lot more to do with geoengineering, and it has a lot more to do with cycles of the sun, as there are, you know, contradictory information out there, and there's a whole lot of information showing that there's a cap and trade scheme that doesn't actually reduce pollution. That is a scam to tax people with a global carbon tax. There's a lot of information on this. I absolutely will have to do another video on this soon, but take it into account that toxicity is something that you cannot avoid. There are 2 million plus peer-reviewed studies on the effects of toxicity on our bodies and on our health and the environment. And there is a ridiculous amount of fecal matter and waste, the blood, the pathogens, the viruses, bacteria, molds, everything just horrible and atrocious that comes from factory farms, that goes right out into watersheds, and it goes into the ground. That's totally unsanitary, you know, and it doesn't get processed like you know, a sustainable amount of animal manure would. It's just absolutely a waste. It's not even used in many cases for what it could be used for, to fertilize crops. The cow manure is actually tremendously important for fertilizing crops, which is why I will talk to you about the balance of vegetarianism and veganism. If you can't have your own protected cows, for example, like the Hare Krishnas advocate, then it can actually make a lot of sense to have cows sustaining agriculture, keeping the food process going, using bulls to plow the land rather than tractors naturally. But there is ecological consequences to the mass animal slaughter. They are destroying the Amazon rainforest for cow meat, and it's being shipped worldwide because of this taste for the flesh that we have come so accustomed to in society. That must be abolished. It must be eradicated, because it is nothing but a frivolous lust for the tongue, for something that when you become a vegan and vegetarian, you don't even crave anymore. It actually becomes so disgusting and putrid. You realize how disgusting it is. It makes you want to vomit, because your body then naturally reacts the way it is intended to, which is to vomit at the smell of rotting, burning, dead flesh. Just as if it was a human body, you wouldn't want that smell. But why is it acceptable when it's an animal body? It's simply because people have been conditioned to that disgust, like smoking cigarettes, which is absolutely just disgusting. Unless you have quit smoking or never smoked, you don't realize that, and you take in these foul odors, and it just seems totally acceptable. It's like someone who hasn't showered in a long time. They will develop perhaps a fungus on their skin. They'll develop a mold even, and they will stink horrendously. Like you maybe have smelled a homeless person before, or some hippie traveler. You've smelt them before. They have fungus and molds growing on them, and it's horrible, but they don't even notice because they've become accustomed to it. So the same thing is true with the scent and taste and flavors of meat. Once you're clean, you start to notice the toxins. You don't want them. So there are ecological consequences: destruction of the rainforest, the air quality. Methane is one. I mean, they say this is a global warming thing. It must have something to do with the atmosphere, okay, because so much methane is being released, an abnormal amount, far beyond what is sustainable. So we have to understand that. And most directly, poisoning of the water, the watersheds. Okay, on the body, this is a big one. Meat creates gas inside the body that is really unfavorable. It slows down digestion, it rots in the gut, it poisons you, it creates a host environment for parasites that poison you over time, that make your immune system weak, because you're always fighting off the parasites, fighting off their eggs, whether they're tapeworms or other type of hookworms and whatnot. There are parasites that can be deadly in sushis, in chicken, of course, pig, cow, lamb, any kind of meats. There are going to be a chance for parasites to live. And even well-cooked meat can still have parasites living in it. So this is very important to know. There is an effect on the gut, an effect on the health. There is an imbalance. The liver naturally creates the right cholesterols for the brain and body that you need. But then there's an imbalance when you start taking these cholesterols in from meat. And these cholesterols plaque on the brain over time and lead towards mental degradation, Alzheimer's. And there's even a brain fog that occurs with people after they eat a significant amount of meat. And this is likely due to the cholesterols, although I'm not a scientist on this matter. I have seen peer-reviewed studies on the links to Alzheimer's. The cholesterol builds up the brain. It's a plaque. It's very difficult to get rid of. It may be impossible to get rid of. You don't want that. You want to keep your brain sharp. The brain is the root of the soul. It's nice to know that you can live a long, healthy, happy life and not go insane because you were eating animals your whole life, which that's what Alzheimer's is. I mean, it's a form of insanity, it's forgetfulness, and it's a seriously horrible disease, and we should all prevent it as much as possible for our own benefit and for the people around us. A big one is cortisol levels. Meat has cortisol. Through the slaughtering of a sentient being that does not want to die, that animal releases a tremendous amount of stress hormone into their bodies that is not eliminated through cooking. That stress hormone remains there, and then you ingest that as a carnist, and you take in the cortisol, and this leads to serious health effects, as 95 or more percent of all disease can be related to stress and cortisol in the body, you are aiding and abetting your own death and destruction and your dis-ease through ingesting cortisol artificially from other animals. You don't want cortisol in your body, and it creates stress in your mind, stress in your emotions, frustration, anger, anxiety. And these are all undesirable human traits. So if you don't want anger, if you don't want anxiety, if you want peace and love, if you want to be open to fulfillment in your life, don't artificially put cortisol in your body. It's counterintuitive. It's not what you want. And you are harming yourself far greater on an emotional, spiritual level by doing so than you would be if you just gave it up. You give up the meat and let go of your attachments and be willing to change, because ultimately nothing is still in the universe. Everything is always moving. It's one of the natural laws. Everything's always vibrating. Okay? Everything is always changing. And the only thing that is constant is change itself. And I implore you to consider changing your entire future lifestyle to know that you can be so much healthier and happier and wiser for it. And you can embody then the non-aggression principles fully through diet. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the spirituality of it. Energy transmutes. Energy is absolute. It changes from one form to another. Our spirit directs our intellect. Our spirit is our willpower to thrive, to continue on, to be successful, to be prosperous, to be happy. And the spirit drives us. And animals have their own spirit. They have their own emotions. They are sentient beings. They are life forms with a type of energy in them that can be known as spirit that cannot be reproduced by any machine or chemical reaction in the laboratory. Once it is released from them, you can't bring them back to life. Okay, there have been experiments, there have been trials where, there have been medical anomalies where people have left their bodies and then come back to life, but they usually do so in a very short amount of time. You can't take a dead body and reanimate it, okay? And the spirit is real. So what happens with that spirit when it leaves? Well, the animal's fulfilled its purpose, and it's going to move up to a higher level of life, understanding the rules of karma. The human who eats that animal, who engaged in the death and destruction of that sentient being, must take on that karma. It is an aspect of the reality we live in, that every action has an effect and a consequence. Karma is a very real thing when you deal with the spiritual world. It's what predicates the root of all religions, the Vedic knowledge, from Krishna, from Vishnu, from the Trinity of Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, from the Brahman effulgence of the yoga cultures. We understand karma, and when we inflict pain on others, it doesn't necessarily affect us in this life, but in the next life, there is in the ethereal realm a vibration, a marking, if you will, that is stained on our soul that we can release ourselves from. We can fulfill our karma through things like activism, which is why I created this channel. This is my karma yoga. And we can also clean up our karma through devotional service to the Creator. But that's kind of another subject. But it is important to understand the spiritual aspects. Just as you would not punch your puppy in the face, you would not eat your pet cat, you would not eat your grandmother or a sibling, father or child. Why would you do it to another animal? They have eyes, they have emotions, they have feeling, they can communicate through their heart's vibration. And they know love, and they know frustration, and they know anger, and they know anxiety as well. And we do not want to inflict those pain on others. It is a libertarian philosophy, the non-aggression principle. Why would we do it on one species of animal and not another? Why would we love a dog but not a deer when they are so similar? And I implore you to have a compassionate sense in your heart, understanding that non-aggression applies to all sentient beings. It is not specifically to humans. Dealing with hunting. if it is to survive, if there's no agriculture, if you are in the Arctic for some godforsaken reason, you should never need to go up there. If you are stranded and you need to live so you can take care of your family, so you can provide hope and health, and so you can provide an opportunity for others in your life, then eating meat is justified, even by the ancient Vedic code, the vegetarian society of the Vaishnavas and those yogis in India. Eating meat is acceptable. It is provided to us. Our body was created profoundly with remarkable abilities to even digest meat by God. This is my understanding. This is not my belief. This is factual basis. I can go into another video about this, but I don't predicate my beliefs on God, or I call it beliefs. It's just a common word for the common nomenclature for this concept, but I predicate it off of facts. Okay. And what has been explained in the Vedic text is that we've been given this ability for survival, should it be for the ultimate highest good, but it never should be a way of life to simply just consume animals if it's not needed. We were designed to live in more tropical type of areas, not freezing cold where you have to eat meat to survive. And ultimately, there is a spiritual escape. There's a way to escape the karma of eating meat if it is for the highest good, if it is necessary, if there really is no alternative. Otherwise, spiritually, the best thing is to go off of what vegetables and fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds that you have available. Spiritually, I think that's the most important thing, this whole aspect, the non-aggression principle of natural law, and what the libertarian philosophy comes from, is a spiritual foundation to not do harm unto others who have not done harm unto you, is the golden rule. And it applies to all species. There's evidence from the Essene Gospels of Christ, for Christians out there, for people who are interested in the esoteric knowledge of world religions. Christ was a vegetarian. You can go to YouTube. I posted in the Longevegetarian site. I'm going to post a link in the bottom of this video. In these Gospels directly, they were found as copper scrolls that cannot be debated. Jesus' own religion, as an Essene, was based on fasting, which is how I live my life too. I talk about this on my Kung Fu channel, and vegetarianism, not causing harm to animals. He was a spiritually enlightened being. Same with Buddha. Buddha was protesting how the Vedic Dharma and the yogic culture had been degraded. And that was prophesied too. I mean, it was absolutely prophesied in the Bhagavatam, this ancient Vedic text, and others, that even the religious cultures would become degraded. And the Buddha was fulfilling prophecy. The Buddha was known to be born, was going to be born before he was born, to promote ahimsa and nonviolence towards all. And that's why the Dalai Lama, other Buddhists today that are eating meat are total hypocrites that are not aligned with the true principles of the Buddha and what is the root of all global spiritual world cultures, which is the Vaishnava culture. Which I'll go into another video on spirituality, maybe after this one too, because it is intimately linked. Diet and spirituality are linked. Understanding the nature of the spirit is that our spirit can become free by not causing harm on others, so that others can be free, so we all can be free. You're not going to be spiritually free if you're inflicting harm on others. That being said, finish up this video with the difference between vegetarian and veganism, and it really has to do with the consumption of the animal products, the milks, the cheese, the eggs. A lot of people know that. There is a place for vegetarian culture. It's interesting to know, and I have books in my library about this, which I'll be sharing with you in the future. I posted links in the Longevegetarian site. The cultures that had no molar decay, let's say moral decay, the ones with no tooth decay, they're actually global cultures. There are cultures long ago from Switzerland, we've found through archaeology, through India, of course, where they did not have cavities and they were living on a vegetarian diet and they were not eating the meat. And it has something to do with the essential fatty acids in the butters and the cheeses, and the calciums. Somehow they are molding to the teeth. The minerals in the raw milk mold to the teeth, actually strengthen the teeth, balancing out any acidity that can cause decay, and these cultures did not have cavities. So that's a great reason for vegetarianism. But again, you don't want to get your products from factory farms. And you also want to become conscious of the real health effects, should you want to be a centurion like myself, of eating heavy animal products. In fact, the smartest, the most activist related thing you can do, even knowing that vegetarianism can help your teeth, is to be a vegan and use alternative vegan options like coconut oil, for example, that you can swish with, you can clean your teeth, and you can help get these fatty acids there. And having just a mineral dense diet, of course, will assist as well. So there is room for vegetarianism, and vegetarianism, as far as a culture goes, makes a lot of sense. The way the Hare Krishnas do it is they would use the bulls to plow the land. The cows would provide milk. They would not steal the cows' milk from the babies. They would let the babies feed. When the babies naturally wean, and when there's extra milk available and the babies aren't hungry, they would milk the cow, which is very pleasurable to the cow. It's like any mother who is breastfeeding. The breasts get really full, it gets irritable, they get fill and painful even. The need to have a release. For the human to do that is a bonding experience with the cow. The cows love it, and there's no denying this. Anyone who works on a farm where they protect cows, the Hare Krishnas, can express this. Any vegans can go, notice this for themselves should they choose to go down that route. But it's a fact that cows actually really enjoy milking naturally when it's for loving caretakers who are helping them, feeding them, loving them, providing shelter for the offspring. And the animals and humans, we really do bond very much through the process. The cows can be very, very grateful and love to give. The cow is known as the mother of all mankind. And their milk has tremendous benefit for us. However, there's a balance of negatives. Again, the cholesterols can calcify the mind. There is other evidence that show perhaps the cholesterols of the cow's milk may actually improve some neurological function related to spirituality. This is well known in the Hare Krishna movement. They believe that you must have milk to reach the highest levels of spirituality, but how much you need is debatable. Prabhupada, the founder of the modern acharya of the global ISKCON and Hare Krishna culture today, even in his own writings, and I've written about this, has expressed concern for purchasing milk from farms that slaughter animals, and almost advocating veganism, basically telling people to use little, very little, if any at all. And it's not necessary. Krishna does not need cow's milk to be happy. You can offer a leaf. Krishna ultimately wants us to protect the cows and not to aid in their destruction. Just because you offer milk doesn't necessarily mean that the cow had a great life and was fulfilled spiritually, although they say it affects them after. That's a whole nother topic, because I'm one of the few vegan Hare Krishnas out there. And there are others, but there's a lot of information showing that it's not necessary. Even Ram lived in the forest for a long time on roots and fruits during the years of exile, and did not consume any animal products that we know of. But that, again, ties into vegan, vegetarian spirituality. Veganism is very much more spiritual practice today. To not even participate in having any of those animal products, to abstain from them, is the best measure. And you can get B12 from various vegan sources today in our modern world. We have great ways to get it. I recommend water kefir. It's very fast, faster than kombucha. I drink it almost daily. My wife and I make it here at the home. We love water kefir. It's like an alternative to soda. It's fizzy. It's got probiotics to help the gut, which helps the mind, and you get your B12. And another is nutritional yeast, which we love. Organic nutritional yeast is great. And veganism is ultimately the highest level. And I've noticed the greatest benefit to my health as an athlete, as a practitioner of Kung Fu. I get the most benefit from being vegan. When I switched being vegan, my gains, my strength, my endurance went through the roof. And when I integrated fasting with that, when I started doing quotidian fasting, daily fasting, which is what I advocate on the Longevitarians page, I have had the most benefit for my mind and body and most productivity as an activist as well. And so it's something that I'm very extreme as an individual, and fasting daily, 90% of the time, only eating one meal at night. I'd like to say 90. I mean, it varies. Sometimes I might eat a very, very small meal, or I have a little nibble of something in the afternoon. But ultimately, I'm fasting. I'm working out to burn glycogen to get through it, and I advocate for that lifestyle the most: vegan, fasting daily, to get the most health possible, and abstaining from food. When you realize you don't need it, you can use your money and your resources and your time doing other things rather than eating. You don't need it. Your body becomes more efficient, and you don't need as much. You extract more from what you put into your body. And so you just become a lean machine, ultimately. And this is a video about why those who follow the natural law, non-aggression principle, should become vegan. I hope it's been influential. I touched on a little spiritual aspect. I'll definitely have to do a video on the Hare Krishna movement, where it has its problems and its faults, and where it has its strengths, at least in dealing with Vaishnava culture and the actual literature. As far as philosophy, because it is natural law. I want to finish on that point, because I think the next video is going to be on spirituality, on the Hare Krishna movement and my role in it. You don't see me with my tilak, but I may start putting it on more for videos. I may have to make that effort, just to reach out to the Hare Krishna movement, and also just to share with people that there is a spiritual foundation for all my activism. It predicates itself on karma yoga, which is prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita as a path towards fulfilling God's purpose and ultimately uniting with him and elevating the spirit to higher spiritual realms for higher purpose after this life, which is my ultimate intention. And that should be the role of government, to offer people the opportunity to have their own spiritual path, where they can fulfill spiritual desires, and to promulgate the natural law philosophy, which I think is perfect because it spans all space and time for all religions and spiritual disciplines. Even for atheists, natural law is fantastic philosophy to prescribe to. The non-aggression principle is great. So, I mean, there's a huge emphasis on that. I don't want to detract from. But there is a spiritual reason to being vegan, and being an anarchist, to being libertarian, predicated off the natural law principles and the non-aggression principle. And the Hare Krishna movement embodies that completely. The movement, well, that's debatable, but the philosophy, for example, absolutely does. I'd like to see the movement embody it tremendous more, and that is certainly something that can happen, and is very timely, as we are in Chaitanya Yuga. Unlike modern Christian philosophies that we're going towards apocalypse right now, Chaitanya Yuga is a prophecy that we're going towards an age of enlightenment and peace. They'll span another 5,000 years before it starts getting bad, and it will actually be the pinnacle of world peace, and we're going to be moving forward and getting more and more just society. I think it's happening very rapidly, as you can see, with technology's advent and more people being conscious of morality and ethical choices around the world. So, that being said, I would like to make this one last point about spirituality and the non-aggression principle. There is this factor that everything can boil down, all morality can be boiled down to one principle in accordance with natural law, which is do not steal. And theft is morally wrong. And when you kill a life form, or you are giving money to someone who is giving money to someone else who's giving money to someone else who is in charge of killing that life form, you're embedding that theft of that sentient being's property, which is their spirit. And that was their property they were born with. God gave them that ability, okay? Or the universe, however you want to imagine it. They had that spirit. It was never yours to take away from them. If you are living a lifestyle supporting their torture and their grief, that is a violation of natural law, and what comes around goes around. And again, it's evident right in the cortisol. I mean, you get the cortisol, it aids in your death and destruction, ailments to your internal organs and body, And consequently, on your deathbed, if you may visualize a pang of conscience and realize that you shouldn't have eaten meat. Possibly, it does happen to a lot of people. I'm certain. It is a conscious choice that you can make to be a vegan, and it starts with education. So go to the site Longevitarians on Facebook and start just scrolling through that archive. It's filled with lots of relevant facts. The Bhagavad Gita is a great read. I encourage everyone to read it, every anarchist, every libertarian, anyone who's interested in esoteric philosophies. It's predicated off this principle that God, Krishna, is saying to Arjuna, who's the warrior, the Kshatriya, I am on your side. Your kingdom has been stolen from you. I am on your side. So God is on the side of those who have had things stolen from them. And that's totally in accordance with natural law. The number one law of natural law that permeates all the other laws, that is the basis for morality, is what the entire Bhagavad Gita is about, which is Krishna's battle, or helping Arjuna on the battlefield, explaining spirituality, the nature of life and death, the nature of the soul. And Krishna is expressing this to Arjuna, that what was stolen from him, that his kingdom was stolen from his property, and God is on his side. So I'd just like to leave it at that. Subscribe for the next video. I'm going to go into depth and blow your mind with some ancient Vedic knowledge and direct you to another Facebook group I have that proves without a shadow of a doubt through scientific evidence that the world was once a Vedic culture, that we're headed there now, and that ancient knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita and all the Vedic texts, all the yogic texts, can be divinely inspiring to help people unlift the veil of illusion and come towards an understanding of peace and prosperity on the planet. I feel coupled with spiritual direct democracy activism, like how the Iroquois predicated their peaceful governance system, which is, when it is in accordance with natural law and the non-aggression principle, we can free society and have total peace on the planet, and it won't take 5,000 years. I mean, we're talking about like less than 100 years. Within my lifetime, that's the goal. That's my life goal, and in my lifetime, we will see world peace. Let it be so. That is the request I have, and I hope you agree. Om. Hare Krishna.